Okay, good evening, guys. Welcome to another session on React. In this lesson, we will be doing forms, React forms. Obviously, you know what forms are in terms of when we're doing HTML. Forms happens to be a way you collect input from the user. And they play essential roles in modern web development because without them, you can't collect information from user. You use it to, do login, use it to do registration, use it to do sign up. You can think about it. There's a lot of things that, forms are used for. And you being able to make use of those forms in your development will make a lot of sense, will make your whole life easier. There's no application that you'll be building that will interact with the user that you will not collect a kind of input from them. So in React, when you are dealing with form, there are two methods we are going to be talking about in how to work with forms. We have controlled components and also uncontrolled components. So let me just give a definition to that, those fancy words. Control component is an approach whereby you save your form data inside useState. When you use control component to handle form, is that you are using useState to handle your forms, collecting of the data from the user. You use useState. Remember what useState is for. You use it to save the state of your application, your data, how data persists between your components. So you now use that knowledge of the useState we have in a previous lesson. We're going to use it here. We need that knowledge here. So for the controlled method, I can create a kind of let's do sign up, and I'm creating a normal function, guys. So I call it sign up. So let's go ahead and start building our form. Every form you are trying to build that you'll be building must be enclosed inside the form tag, obviously, then followed by our structure that we're trying to create. I'm going to remove things that are not needed in this form just to make it very light. So this serves as our email input to receive whatever we want to receive here. The next thing we need to do is to provide the next part, which is password. So we'll replicate what we have here to denote the password section. I want to do a checkbox. So finally, we can then have our submit button. What we've been able to build is HTML. Let's now start doing the major work. What we want to do right now is ability for us to be able to get the information we put inside this email and process it, because that's the idea of what we are doing. Process information that we have and send it to the server, or either use it by the client side. Whatever case scenario that you want to use, you should be able to make use of those information. Now, we want to use the method of useState. And what useState does is that it saves the information of what is happening here inside state. So let's go ahead and define useState information. We already have useState, being brought up here, which is useState. So in using the form, one of the things you want to do is to tie each of the elements to a useState variable. You tie each of the elements to a useState variable. So what that means is that I'm going to have 3 useState variables: email, password, and checkout, right? That's what it means. But of course, I'm going to give you several methods in which you are going to do that. So what that means is that you want to define 3 different variables that will hold all this form. The first one is, remember how you need to initialize your useState variable. You start by declaring your constant and having this kind of array structure whereby you have the first item that you want to save the value, the variable name, and you then have this function that does set email. And remember what this guy is supposed to do. He's supposed to set the email. That's the only way you can set the email, by using set email. The final thing you need to do here is then to specify useState. Then inside the useState will be the default thing that you want the email to have. By default, we don't want it to have anything. So we start gradually and we work our way down to check me out. Right, so we'll start doing it gradually. So how do you get the value here inside this email? One of the way you want to do that is that whenever you type here, as you type information inside this text box, you want it to be able to save the information inside that email. So that means you need a function that will be tied to unchange of the text box. So most of the things we'll be doing will be tied to what? The unchange event of the control of the form elements. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So we know that this is the element here and it's called input. So we need to now do unchange and know what we want to do on change. We want it to handle a change event in such a way that it will set the value of the what is in the text box here into this email. That's what we want to do. So we're creating a function to do that handle for us. So handle email. So the purpose of this will be to handle email. And then we can go ahead and build our function to do that. Handle email. Remember that event have this E. There's this event that's happening here. You are capturing a key down event. It means you can capture an event here. There's an event here which is hidden. There's a variable here which can be used, and this event E, I'm using E for event now. I can write it in full, but I use E for short. So whenever you are handling an event, a parameter is being sent to the function you are creating. So you can create this E here, write this E here in such a way that you can use it in your function. We did this in our previous videos. So whenever you are capturing event like this, the event you are capturing in this case is unchange event. The information is being passed to this function, and then you can use it in your function to do whatever you want to do. You'll see how we're going to use it. So the same thing as onClick. onClick, sends mouse events. In this case, unchange sends keyboard events, which you can use to read what it is that was typed. So let's go ahead and continue with what we're trying to do. Once the person clicked this, or once there's a change in the value here, we want the system to set exactly the email. And how do you set email? Remember guys, there are different methods in which you can set the value of an object depending on the type of variable that we're using. This time, in this case, it is string, so it's straightforward. We'll talk about object array in previous classes. So we'll just go straight to the point and set our object. So how do you get the value of what was typed here? Very simple. e.target.value. That is what was used. And you are done. So how do you make sure that, how do you check what it is that you've done here? We can do that simply by logging it on the output of the screen. Let's log it where we will see it. Let's come here outside of the system and log everything we've done. Okay, so this is what I want to put inside at the bottom here. I want to be able to say my email is equal to whatever I'm typing, just for it to be visually available so that you guys can see that it's actually working. That's the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. So let's go ahead and try and say james@yahoo.com. So that is giving us that information. What we've been able to do here is that we've been able to capture this value here inside this email. And you are going to see how to process it, because the idea is not for us to print out the results. The idea is for us to be able to submit whatever we are doing. So we'll get to the point. So let's go to the next one and set for password. Let's be very fast. We've been able to set email. So we will replicate what we've done by doing this and say set password. And of course, your password will be blank by default. In the case of password, what do? You do the same method, but instead of let me save this. Okay, this is saved as password. Instead of you doing unchange to handle email, what are you handling now? You're handling password. So I'm gonna say handle password. But now what am I setting here? You are setting password. You are still using the same method. So how do we test that our password is showing? You can also make it visible here, so that you can see the password. The essence of this is so that you are just having a visual representation of what you are doing. So I can do password and have our password display here like so. If you try that out, you should be able to say james@email.com. Password can be 1, 2, 3. So you can see that this side is working. But the next thing you want to do is, let's quickly do the last one here. And this one has to do with check, obviously true or false. So that's Boolean operation. So quickly, let's do that. So I can just call it check. You can say set check. You might want to give it a default state if you want, so which is false, because by default, when it is not click, it is false that is there. Then we want to go to what handles the change events. This is also an input and is a checkbox. It's gonna carry your unchange. Remember that you've not written the function handle check. We are still using the first method, guys, and this first method has several variations. So I doing this on purpose, just for you to see the work that needs to be done, and then for you to decide the right choice for you. Then I can come here and say set check, and I have my value there. You have to know how to use each of these input elements. So you can set the value by deciding if it's checked or not. So if you do true here, obviously you can see that the checked is true. Another thing that we didn't show you guys is that we didn't tell you how to persist the data, right? In some cases, you might want the information to be there by default, because you can go and get all this data from the backend. For example, maybe you land in a page and then by default, the font or the document is supposed to be pre-filled with some information. How do you set the information of that thing by default? Is by you having the value set here. And how do you then impute it inside this email address by default? Is by you setting the value to email. So let's quickly do that. We skip that in the declaration of our form, but all those things is true, can be achieved with JavaScript. So we can just, this is pure HTML value. This will tell you what the value should be by default. So if you say email, whatever value is there in the email is what will be there by default. So if email by default is k@email.com, let's say this is coming from the server side, and once the system loads for the first time, you can see that it's holding k@email.com. So and that should be a default information that should be there. So you should always set the value of what will be there by default. That's if you are loading information from the server and it's not just happening for the first time. So that needs to be stated, that you can also set the value of what should be visible by default. So that's how to do that. And you can do the same thing for checked, but in this case, checked happens to be a kind of different stuff. It doesn't work like this as value. What it has checked, and you can determine if it is checked or not based on the result that comes out from checked. So we have a variable already called checked. So, and if you do that, you can see that information. So let's pass through to the default value of check and see if it will get checked by default. So if I run that and I come here, we should be seeing, let me see what is happening. We should be seeing checked here. So I have a typo here. The property, the right property for the input element for this is called checked and not check. It's called checked. So here you can see that the information, once it's true, it will set this part by default to be true. So I can go back and set it to false, and you should see that it will disappear by default. So let's move on to the next thing I want to show you guys. So let's submit the information, because all these things we are doing now, the form is still in the client side. How do you take it to the server side for processing? Let's go. So now that you've been able to, because this form can grow, guys, it doesn't have to be limited to this. You can keep having more things, more kind of forms. You can have dates, you can have other things. This is just an example. So let's submit. How do you submit this information? When you come here on the form section, you will say on submit. There's an event on a form that handles the submit event. So whenever you click on any submit form button, because this is a proper submit button, guys. You can see the type of the button is called submit. You can use normal JavaScript button, or you can even use an A tag to submit anything that you want to do. So, but if you use this one, then you can control the logic. Anytime that a submit button is clicked, this section will be triggered. And when this section is triggered, I want to call a JavaScript function that I'm about to create now. And I can call that function handle submit. We write our code to handle submit. So again, it comes with your your event. When you submit a form, the normal reaction of the form is to load the page. I will click it now. When you submit, you can't just see it, but my page just flicker. It's so fast that you can't see it. Whenever you submit anything, the pages reloads. So you want to stop that behavior from happening. You don't want it to reload. You want to process the information. You want to capture the information and process it. That's your intention. So we do e.prevent default. That's our intention. We want to prevent the default. Don't submit it. So if I click submit now, the page is not flickering again. All the information on the form is saved where? Is saved here, and you can properly send it to the server. We will not be doing anything server related yet. You have your information, and once you use this handle button, this is where you do the processing of submitting the data. The value is here for you. Email, password, and check. They are all available at your beck and call. If I remove this and just say email is equal to, so if I submit this now, we should be expecting, okay, that's it. So you can see on the bottom left that you have your value there. Whenever you submit it, it's sending the information to this function, and then you can do whatever you want to do with it. The next thing is, how do you handle form validation? Because that is very important. A validating form refers to the process of checking user input data to ensure that it meets specific criteria or requirements before it's then submitted to the server or used for other processing. So an example would be that you want to check that people have provided a very long password or a very sensitive password. We'll just use length for this case of this example, because there are other pattern matching method which is beyond this class. So we'll just focus on length. You see how to validate an input. Let's validate the password that the person has entered a valid password, or a password that is more than 5 in character or more than 3 in character. Let's go ahead and do that. So the next thing is that you want to check, as you're entering the input, you want to know the state. As this character, has it exceeded 5? If it has exceeded 5, don't see anything. As long as it's below 5, complain. So where do you put that information? Where do you, raise that info? Is when you are typing here, and that is under handle password. That is when you do that. So this is where you check to see the value of what you are typing. Is it less than 5? If it's less than 5, raise an alarm. So let's go ahead and compute that. It's very straightforward, guys. So like I said, you want to do check. So you do if the value that you have there, since you are using this value 2 times now, you can save it somewhere else so that you don't keep using it over and over again. You can hold it in a variable, right, and say value, and it becomes this. This way, since you are using it continuously, you can just maintain one use like this instead of writing something very long. So you can do something like this. If this dot the length, you know that a string has a length property. So I'm accessing the length property of a string right now. How do I complain to the person that this thing needs attention? How do I complain? I complain by creating a section underneath this side here, this space that it has password. Underneath it, I want to complain something. And I think Bootstrap has something for us. But before I will just use this one here. This one that says form text. So I'll use this section, and that's what I want to use to complain. And I'm putting it directly under this one. Then I will just write error here, just to test what is happening. So you can see that it's working well. So I want to change the text as well to text danger. So this is what I want to use to complain, guys. Remember that this is a password. You might want to check so many things. You might want to check the length. You might want to check the fact that it has a capital letter. You might want to check so many things. So I will make this dynamic in such a way that you can pass information to it. Now, what do you think are the things now that I need to save? I've captured two things. Number one, you need to check if there's error. Number two is the message. So I have two objects I need to worry about: error and message. So I can create one use state for that, or I can create two use states. But I don't need to be creating too many things. I can just create it in form of an object. So I will say password check. The idea is I want to check my password. That's the purpose. And the password check is going to have two objects. One will be the valid or not valid. The second one will then be the message to be processed. So, okay. And this can be written anyhow. There's no way that is right or wrong. Depend on the logic of what you are trying to do. That will determine what exactly it is that you should end up writing. So I'll say useState. What is the default state of this password check? The default state should be that I want to pass two objects to it. By the way, two objects. What will be the object to it? Error is error, meaning there's an error there. Is error, I will say false, meaning there's no error by default. Then message, meaning the message I want to pass, let me make it short form. The message I want to pass there should be empty. So these are the two things that I want this password check to have. And I can always split this as a separate thing entirely, but I just want to make it one single thing to make my work easy. So I'll come here, and of course, to set your password, you have to use set password to change, set password check to change all this information. At this point, I want to complain because it's less than 3. What am I complaining about? I'm setting objects. Remember the object I'm setting. I'm setting is error is equal to true. What other thing am I setting? I'm also setting the message I want to pass across. The message I want to pass across is that password length should be more than 3. That is it. So what if it passes all these things? It passes all these criteria. If there's no problem, what should it do? It should set the its error that is false. That there's no error. And what should happen to the message? There should not be message in there. So let's go and check if this will work. Now let's go to where we want to have our comments, and that is at this bottom here. So I'll do password message. That way you will at least see the message first, if there's a message. In fact, I can leave it like this, and this could solve everything. So I put password message. So let's start typing. So if I type first character, you can see that I say password length should be more than 3. I type the next character, it's still not budging. I type the third character, then it's allowing me to go ahead. So I know that there's a little bug in my code. I will just do less than or equal to 3 so that it will obey what I wrote. So if you do this, so it works. So this same method can be used to check if there is a case, maybe capital letter, and then you can go ahead and decide what to show and tell the user that, oh, you need to add 1 capital letter, you need to add 1 special character and whatnot. Let's move on to the next thing. We are still talking about control components, guys. Let's go to the next thing. Now, having seen all these things, what do you think is happening here? There is a lot of repetition. Number one repetition that I want you to see is this handle email, handle password, and handle check. Imagine if you have 10 forms. You have 10 things to fill. It means you have to write 10 of this. What if you have 20? Forms can go crazy. You can have many, forms that have many things to do. So how can you automate it to make it faster? So let me give you guys another approach to using control components. And this method is using a single object to capture everything. Now, instead of I'm not going to delete all this. I just want to create something different so that we don't get a bunch of errors. I want to show you another method of doing this. Of course, we're still using useState, but this time around, I'm going to use one useState variable. So I'm going to do constant, and then I'm going to say form data. And the idea of this is that I want to capture all the form element data inside these objects. I'm using objects now. I'm not using string. I'm not using numbers. I'm not using boolean. I'm putting everything inside an object. That way, it makes it what? It makes it kind of easy for us to manage everything. That's the point of what I want to show you guys. So here, what do you guys will be here? Set form data, then followed by our useState, and then we can then specify is an object, mind you. So we can go ahead and start specifying the name of all our forms. So I'm going to be doing email, password. I'm just going to stop at 3 and I'm going to say check. And I'm going to put default value. Remember that this is an object. Objects have a key and value. So each of our key are what is there on the left hand side, and the values are what is here in this part. So whatever you put in your value here, you know, like we said in the other one, is what should show in this part. You'll see how we're going to default all these other things to what they are. So let me just put a sample data. So let me say test at test.com. That is what we want to default here. So let's go to where, you know, those value are, the default value are supposed to show, and then align them to what they should be. Remember, the name of our object is form data. So I can go down and go to where they are being utilized and change this. Instead of it showing email, it will be form data.email, and we should be expecting to see our default value right there. And this is a method that we're going to be using now. So I'm going to remove quite a lot of things that has to do with the old method, guys. So like all these function call that they are being called individually, we're going to call only one function, and that's the benefit of using this method we're about to use now. So remember that this one is now a kind of a boolean, so we can set this to what? A boolean value, and say either true or false. So if we do true here, you're expected to see a checkbox button here, and by default, you know, we're making it false. So we're removing all this one so that it will be blank by default. So we are going to remove all these handle click. All these guys are going to be obsolete, and we're also removing this. They are obsolete. Like I said, we are shrinking down our code to make it more precise and less error prone. You will agree with me that the more code that you have, the more error that you will be getting. So instead of us having individual functions that says handle email, handle password, handle check, we just have one function. And what's the work of that function? Is to handle a change in the form input. So I'll just call it handle change. And the idea is that just handle any change that happens. You know, I don't want to know, just undo the change for me. So I'm going to go here and replace all those specific handle. Of course, the submit remains what it is because you have to submit. So I'm going to remove all these ones that says that we're being specific handle email. We don't have anything like that again. So I'm also going to remove handle password. And you can see that we are streamlining our function into one, meaning our work is going to be less and less. We just need to focus on one function. Remember, in our previous video, I taught you how to update objects. I taught you how to update objects, that when you want to update one particular part in an object, how to handle it. So we're going to be using that method here. So nothing too fancy, but it's very easy, and just follow me. One of the requirements of using this method is that you need to give these guys a name. This element, you need to give them a name. Email is not defined. Okay, we use email somewhere. So suddenly, I know something like that was going to happen. So form data. You know, we changed all these guys. So they are complaining. I think now it should be fine. And one of the requirements, like I said, is that we'll give these elements, we'll give them a name. We'll give them a name. So the first one here is email. We'll have to give it the same name for the code to work the way we want it to work. Now we'll go to password. You know that name is an HTML attribute, guys. So nothing special here. And the reason why we're giving it a name, you're going to see the reason why, because we need it in creating our function for it to work properly. Then the same thing here, name, we give it check. So let's go ahead and see how to set the property of each of these value on change. Remember that anytime we change any of these things, we want to be able to change the corresponding property name. That's the idea, guys. That's the idea of what we are doing here. So we have our set form data. Can you guys remember how we did this the last time? Because we are dealing with form and we want to be able to edit just one particular part of the objects. We're not updating all the objects at once. You can if you want to, but you know that this data, this function will be called per form input. So you want to just focus on that part and update that part. So what I want to do is that whatever the value of the current form is, preserve it. That's what this code is all about. This code that you saw now, that I do dot form data. Keep the current value of whatever it is here, but allow me to be able to change one of these. Now, how do I know the one I want to change? I have email, I have password, I have check. How do I know the one I want to change? Luckily for me, I have already gone to use the name to save them individually. So therefore, I can target the name by saying e.target.name. This is the name of what I want to save. Because it's a variable, I'll put it in this form. It's a variable. And then I can say the value should be e.target.value. That is it, guys. That is what makes this whole thing works. So let's give it a test and see if all these stories we are doing works. So let's save the email and do email@email.com. You can see that our email is being saved under. Let's save our password to 123456, and you can see that the password is also working. Let's now check this part. We didn't monitor our check section, but let's go ahead and see and dump our results to see what happens. The good thing is that we can dump the whole form data like this because the form data is an object, right? Remember, the form data is an object, so we can dump an object like this and it should show us our results in the console. So let me clear this and run it again. You can see the result on the bottom, guys. So here it says the email we enter here, and then you can see the check says on. So I guess he's using on and off for his own method. So if I do something like this, I change this, I should have whatever I submit. You can see my results, guys. Whatever you submit will stay on there. You can see the code we wrote, very short. And one of the requirements is that you need to have the name of the input like this so that you can be able to reuse them. Let me make it a little bit clearer. So what this does is that it captures the name and the value of the target inside these variables, so that you can say here you are capturing the name, that's the name of the name part here, and this section you are doing the value. So these codes are entirely the same thing, but here it just makes it more clearer to read. So quickly, let's look at the second method. The second method is called Uncontrolled Component. So form data is handled by document object model DOM rather than by React useState. The DOM maintains the state of the form data and updates it based on what's on the user input. Quickly, let's use that method. So that method, we're still going to use the same form. I'm just going to title this one something different, and I'm going to call it Uncontrolled Component. So having this, what is responsible for that is called useRef. What is useRef? useRef is a React hook that allows you to persist value between render. It can be used to store a data that can change and does not cause data to re-render. just like useState. useState allow once you change a value that is inside the useState, it will render that information. But once you change a value that is inside useRef, it does not trigger anything to change. It just saves that information inside it. So let's go and see how to use useRef to be able to control what is happening here. So the first thing you need to do is import it from React. That's the first thing you need to do. The second thing is that, of course, we're not using useState anymore. You are not using useState. So all these guys will go. So all these guys will go. And let's now see how we want to make use of useRef. Instead of you setting the name of what you want to save here, you will create a useRef variable for all the form inputs. Let's start from the beginning. All these guys will go. All these guys will go. Yeah, you're not using this method anymore. So we have 3 forms or 3 form inputs. I will start by creating constant and say email ref. That's email reference, and the value will be null by default, meaning there's nothing inside. This is how you should create it for form input. I'm going to replicate this for 3 more times to save for password and also to save for check. So this is one of the requirements. Step 2. Now you don't need to handle any change event again. You won't be running change events anymore. You tie each of the variable to the form input. So the first variable is email ref, and where is the email guy here? You change this one. Instead of name, you don't need the name anymore. You can leave the name, but you don't need the name anymore. There's a new tag, a new attribute that is available based on React, and it's called ref. So the ref allows you to reference that information and you equate it to the new variable that you've just created, which is email ref. And this is how you do for all the form inputs that you have in your page. Let's go ahead and do for password and for the last one there. So you don't need to use name anymore. This one will now be password ref, and this one will then be check ref. So we don't need to monitor the changes anymore. Very important too. If you need to monitor the changes, this is not the method to use. If you don't want to monitor the changes, then you are on the right path by using this method. So we need to, fix the error that we are seeing right now. So I'm going to remove, of course, one of the error that all this one is what is causing the error, because we are referencing what we say we are not using anymore. We are referencing some variable that we said we are not using. I call this check. Which other ones again? Let me see the error. Handle change is not defined. Okay, so we don't need to call all these functions that we created anymore. All these functions are not needed. Okay, I think that is about it. How do you get the data? Right, the form is working, right? Password is working. These forms are working. How do you make the data? How do you see the data that you have? How do you send the data to the server? Just like this case, we're able to send the data to the server by doing form data. Now, where is the data of each of the individual form elements that we have here? The data is inside email ref, data is inside password ref, the data is inside check ref. How do you get it out? You get it out by going through each of them one after the other. Just like in the case when you were using useState for individual of the elements. So let's quickly run it and do that out one by one. We look at for email ref is equal to, how do you get the value? It's by saying email ref dot current dot value. This is how to access each of the value of the item here. So I can repeat this scenario for the rest of the value. So if I want my password ref and if I want my check ref, and I have to state this one is password and this one is for this. So if I try to fill in the form now and say email at email and put some fancy password and submit this. Look at it, guys. Look at it. This is what we have. It's, still submits down our information for us. We have all our information right here. So you need to then figure out at what point do you need to use these two methods. In fact, I've shown you one method for uncontrolled components, and I showed you two methods for control components. Because in the control component, you can either use state individually based on the elements, to tackle what we want to do, or to group everything together and use as form elements. There are reasons why you do it individually, and there are reasons why you do it together. If you want to be able to track changes that go on inside a particular form element, you might want to do it individually, and then track that. What I want to give you guys as an assignment to this is for you to go and do another form. I just did a sign up form. Go and try out contact form. Like if you want to get contact information from people, websites, and they say contact us, where you have email, you have subject, you have text to provide the reason why you want to contact us. So we didn't talk about audio forms, so you can think about how text will look like. It's pretty simple, straightforward. So do for text, do for select, and let me see what you guys will come up with. Thank you for staying to the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you in the next one.